looks good, Kitson.
Yeah, my hair is so big right
We're
now.
live. We're live.
Sure, so we're like,
Oh dear.
There's two kinds of blues. There's happy blues and there's sad blues. I don't think I ever sing the same way twice. I don't think I ever sing the same tempo. One night's a little bit slower, next night is a little bit brighter. That's kind of how I feel. I don't know, the blues is sort of a mixed up thing. You just have to feel it. Anything I do.
hi folks, thanks for joining us. Let us know where you're joining us from in the chat, please.
On the drums, Billie Holiday.
The blues to me is like
All right.
being very sad, very sick, going to church, being very happy. There's two kinds of blues. There's happy blues and there's sad blues. I don't think I ever sing the same way twice. I don't think I ever sing the same tempo. One night's a little bit slower, next night is a little bit brighter. That's kind of how I feel. I don't know, the blues is sort of a mixed up thing. You just have to feel it. Anything I do sing, it's part of my life.
On the drums, Billie Holiday.
We'll give it a couple of minutes
The
before we
blues to me
start.
is like being very sad, very sick, going to church, being very happy. There's two kinds of blues. There's happy blues and there's sad blues. I don't think I ever sing the same way twice. I don't think I ever sing the same tempo. One night's a little bit slower, next night is a little bit brighter. That's kind of how I feel. I don't know, the blues is sort of a mixed up thing. You just have to feel it. Anything I do sing, it's part of my life.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. Welcome from, we have folks from El Cerrito. We have Jean from San Francisco. We have Sheree. Thank you so much. And Lucretia is in the house. Yay. It's so nice to see you. Thank you. And if you can, please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. And my name is Sidek Gabrayes, and I am the Education Program Manager here at MOAD. And I'm here with my friends and my colleagues, Kitson, Remy, Rodney, Charlie, and Dimitri. And Aswan will join us in a little bit as well. And if you're joining us on Facebook, please leave us a message and comments there. We'll go back and forth between Zoom and Facebook to get your messages and questions. And before we start, I would like us to have a quick moment of silence as we stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. The names that you will see going up and up on each side of the screen are names of people that we have lost due to police brutality, and we honor those names. Of course, that's the fraction of the names that we could put on this wall. Also, as many of us are settler, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples whose land we are located. With deep respect, MOAD acknowledges that even in virtual space, our people, our work, and our network servers, our own native lands, and thanks the indigenous people of the Bay Area who've stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you. And if you know the name of your land, the indigenous name of your land, please put it in the chat. We really appreciate that. Um, all right. So I am very, very excited today to bring you our program. And I have to say that it was curated by Dimitri Broxton, our Senior Director of Education, and all of our thoughts, the docents, all of our thoughts and ideas were put into this. So I am just so excited that you are here with us today. I am looking forward to your participation through chat, whether you're on Facebook or on Zoom. I will invite Dimitri to tell us a little bit about our program today and delve right into the music and the art today. Dimitri, go ahead, please.
All right, first of all, I'm gonna take a second to say hi to my dad. I see him out there. Hey, Pops. Yes, all the way in Florida. So I'm just gonna keep this as brief as possible. The reason that I am the one who's curating the talk about the blues is because I'm totally obsessed with the blues. I have a long history of it, just hanging out with my grandma on Sunday mornings. And that was the only kind of music she would put on, either the blues or jazz, but we really were both. We bonded over the blues. My grandma is from Louisiana, and so that's also one of the origin points of the blues. And so it was just something we really connected over the years. So the history of the blues, and again, I'll try to keep this as brief as possible, I promise. But the origins are poorly documented because the origins come from the South, from the slave plantations. It is believed that what we know, the music that we know as the blues, actually originated right after the Civil War, and most particularly in the Mississippi Delta region, which is also the birthplace of some of the most influential styles of the blues that we know. The inspiration comes from hymns, the minstrel shows, work songs, and field hollers of enslaved folks. And most importantly, it was really developed by sharecroppers and their descendants. So there'll be a lot of connections with those. At this time, Africa, post emancipation, a lot of African Americans had a desire to move away from the musical forms such as the spirituals, which they identified with the days of slavery, and they wanted to create something new that was all their own. One of my favorite blues musicians, Sunhouse, he talks about the blues. This is one of the most interesting things for me that I've always found fascinating, is he talks about that the blues lyrics are not always exactly what they seem. There's often a lot of coded language in the lyrics. So sometimes when a blues musician is talking badly about his woman, that woman is actually standing in as a code for his white boss or the man, the system at large. So that's an important thing. It's not always just about something bad. There's also, much like, enslaved folk songs, there's coded language in there that that the community understands. The blues music gave birth to R&B, rhythm and blues, and really famously rock and roll music. Also not spoken about is soul music, funk, and also hip hop. A lot of the influences from the blues are encoded in hip hop. By the 1960s, blues becomes one of the most important influences on the development of popular music in the United States, and even has an impact on Great Britain. And we'll get into that in a little bit. The name of the blues actually comes from an English term from the 17th century, when someone is recovering from alcoholism. They would say you had blue devils, and then later it was shortened to the blues. And then in the 1800s also became synonymous with, if you had the blues, it also meant that you were drunk. So, kind of what the genre is about, I think there's a misconception that the blues is dead. It's a music of the past. It is still very much alive. And, the music talks about love just as much as it talks about misfortunes and sadness. It talks about love, freedom, personal triumphs, and sometimes there's naughty content that's also discussed. I invite you, we're not going to talk about it, to listen to the lyrics of Lucille Bogan. Just Google search her and you'll see how absolutely naughty the music could be. It was coined or dubbed as the devil's music. First, we don't really know the origins of who started calling it the devil's music. It may have stemmed from the church because a lot of times singers would leave the church and go, sing on stage to make some money, or could have also originated in white America. During the early part of the 20th century, it was called the devil's music popularly in American media to keep it off the radios. And if you know the history, that didn't last for very long. Um, During the Great Migration, and I'm gonna try to wrap myself up, I promise. During the Great Migration, the blues music travels
No,
to
keep going, keep
Chicago.
going.
Who's naughty lyrics? Someone asked Lucille Bogan. Google search it. The first thing that's gonna come up is gonna make your ears break. Probably, she was really, really naughty. um, So, when you get to Chicago, they start to electrify it and, completely change the style altogether. One of the markers of the blues is the 12 bars or measures, which, there's other versions of it, but also playing notes off of the standard. So what they would call, yes, make your ears big, what they call the blue notes. So if when you hear it, you'll know it, and we're going to play some of them. A key component is the call and response, which also is derived from the work songs, which we'll hear in a little bit. But we know that call and response is something that originates in West Africa and was brought to the Americas. Usually it's performed solo with a guitar, but later, into the 20th century, as African Americans gained access to other instruments, pianos and, which are super expensive and huge, become integrated into the music as well as drums. I'll let Remy talk about the influence of drums a little bit later. The importance of the blues, we know mostly about male blues singers, and so you'll see in this collection as we get through this, there's a lot of females. There were a lot of female singers that didn't get their just desserts during the time, and so we want to highlight them as well. The blues offered a lot of African American women in the 20th century an opportunity to escape menial labor, like being housekeepers. They could sing the blues, they could travel around the country and sometimes the world and make a really good living. And again, 1960s, the blues goes out of favor until the 1960s when white America discovers this amazing music that was kept off the radio waves. Artists like the Rolling Stones, who actually got their name from a Muddy Waters track, really made it popular and brought it back. And so then Americans started to really appreciate this music that was born here. I think I'll probably just kind of leave it at that. But yeah, again, the blues was born from this, this Jim Crow era that came after emancipation and Reconstruction. And so it was born out of turmoil and strife, much like hip hop music. But I just want to make it clear that all the blues music that you're going to hear or that exists in the world is not sad.
Oh my goodness, Dimitri, thank you so much. That was amazing. We love Dimitri. Thank you so much. And the next piece is, so how we're going to do this is we're going to look at the art and look at the art closely, listen to the music that we've paired it with, and then talk about the art. And so the first piece that we're looking at is William H. Johnson's Chain Gang. And let's look at it a little bit closer and listen to some music, and we'll have Kitsani and Charlie comment on it.
I went to the bottom, Lord God Almighty. I went to the bottom, God Almighty, Lord, with a big round diamond, Lord God Almighty, with a big round diamond, Lord,
Kitson, comments?
I'm going
Goosebumps.
to comment on the music because, as it turns out, this recording was actually done, as it says here, recorded on a prison farm by prisoners, which I find fascinating. Alan Lomax, I guess, went down there and recorded them doing this song out in the field, outside, wherever they had to complete their work as actual state prisoners, which I find fascinating. Also, this particular artist, that the painting that we're looking at, was very, very prolific. He has 1,000 paintings in the Smithsonian alone. There may be more paintings that we're unaware of, but he's got 1,000 paintings at the Smithsonian, which is a lot of paintings. So that's what I have to say about this. Of course, I love the painting and the style, the stripes on the uniforms. It's just stunning.
Yeah, I really love this painter. This is William Johnson, and he's so great for a number of reasons. For one thing, I really like the repetition of shapes that you see in this particular painting. Today, if it's possible to show the whole piece instead of it, yeah. So I mean, you can see the repetition of these curved shapes. You have the curvature of the back, you have the curvature of, I'm not sure if that's a side that we're looking at, that little piece there, which is really wonderful. But the other thing to really notice is look at the huge hands, the huge feet. It's really wonderful. And it's interesting because this artist started out as a realist. So I think it's he really changed his style up, and a lot of it was due to the influence of his wife, who was a woman who was about 15, 16 years older than he was. It was a Dutch painter. He was in Europe at the time when he met her. And my Danish is not so good, so forgive me if I'm butchering her name, but it's Holga Krake or Krake. I don't know how you actually pronounce that. And she's really the one who really pushed him to do sort of more like folk style painting. And he really took that to heart. So I think it really gives this just a wonderful feeling. And Dimitri, I tip my hat to you, because that's just the perfect music to have with this particular painting. And it's really amazing how close we were to completely losing his work. He got very, very sick. He had to come back, and his stuff was in storage, and it was almost going to be destroyed because they couldn't pay the rent on the storage. And again, we got to give a shout out to the Harman Foundation, which has done so much to really help and promote Black art. And they're the ones who came in to save a lot of this artwork. So, great story behind it. The other cool thing about this painting is it's done on plywood, which I think is really fascinating. A lot of artists, what they do is, they don't have money, they'll paint, what they can find. And plywood certainly would not be my first choice to paint on, but still, it's just got this, these vibrant colors to it. Again, that repetition of shapes, even that little hillock that we see in the back, it almost mirrors the curve of that guy's back. It's a great piece. He's a great artist. If you don't know him, he's someone worth looking up. Oh,
Thank you, Cassandra.
Sherry is mentioning the curve between the two most prominent feet also. Yeah, so you see a lot of curves in there, and I really love it when artists sort of do echoes of geometric shapes, and I think that this is a great example of that.
Right, same artist. The next piece we'll be looking at is early. Oops, sorry about that. Skipped just a bit ahead. We'll go back. It's called Early Morning Work. And I think we have Remy and Aswan leading us through this one. Let's listen to the music with the art.
Trouble so hard, ooh Lord, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Went down the hill the other day, soul got happy and stayed all day.
Yeah, I really, first of all, I love this piece because of the distinctive blue that he uses in this particular piece and some of his other pieces as well. But what I really wanted to say about this was just imagining that once he returned from Europe and coming back to America, is just like when you've been away from what you call your natural home and then you return, and then how you see it, what your perception is of a place that you've left upon your return, and him coming back and looking at the African American community and recording the hard work that was being done, the physicality. And even though you look at these bodies, they don't look like they're physically necessarily capable of doing a lot. But if you look at the whole picture, you see just how much work is being done. This farming scene, you've got the donkey, or I think that's a donkey, and you've got the chickens, and you just get this whole idea of, you know, work was not this in any way, this whole idea that we have of work now is 9 to 5. You know, you're up early with the roosters and feeding the chickens, and work does not finish until you know, literally your back is sore and aching, and then you just have to get up and do the work. And the whole family here is also involved in the whole activity of the work that needs to be done here. Is
okay, Remy. Yeah, what I love about William H. Johnson's work is it evolves over time. It can be very different. He's a well-trained artist. And with this particular piece, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if you can see me because I can't see myself. Anyway, but it's the use of color, his use of predominantly blue, this abstraction, you know, and it sort of has you, you know, inquiring what is going on in the picture, not visually, as well as we're looking at the day-to-day. This is early morning work, so you're getting up, maybe feeding the chickens or getting ready to plow the field. But just noticing, if you look at it, you know, the color of the sky, the gentleman, maybe the father's leg appears to be walking towards you, but maybe it's not. It's the collapse of space. There's a tree in the background that's sort of coming up and over and around the house. These lines in the painting, as well as, you know, looking at laundry in the back, and the blue gated fence. It's just quite an interesting piece visually to look at. And I think Charlie mentioned in our review of it that, you know, you have to change perspective, or that could have been Dimitri said that, to view it, you know, how you view it. But really nice, oversized hands, feet. Like, I don't know what that piece is up in the sky, you know, what he's trying to communicate, but it's a real interesting piece.
Yeah, it really is. And then, you know, I'm also curious about, to me, the music itself that Dimitri chose for this one. It kind of reminds me of his life as well. So Dimitri, if you can comment on that a little bit, and also thank you, Aswan and Remy. That was amazing to look at the art with you.
Yeah, I just think an important thing with Johnson when we're talking about him also is like, he is someone who was born and raised in South Carolina. He left as a very young man, as a teenager, to go to New York to study. He goes to Europe, and it's not until later in his life that he goes back to South Carolina and rediscovers his family, his culture, where he comes from. And so much of this work is based off of him just looking at where he came from through a whole other lens. And I think that's really an exciting or interesting part about his work, and why it's especially interests me. And talking about Vera Hall, the singer, I heard this song for the first time when Moby released his album
Yeah.
in 2000, right? Like, and then later on you're like, well, who did he sample? Which is kind of like that hip hop influence of like, where did this come from? Who's the origin? And another ethnomusicologist, John Lomax, recorded Vera, and this is her most famous song. And just I categorize it as the blues because of the context of it. Also, I think the call and response of her repeating her lines again to herself. So it's like the self call and response, even though there is no musical instruments playing at the same time until Moby remixes it later.
Oh, thank you for that. I think we can talk about William H. Johnson for the whole time, but let's move on to Alice Wilson, and let's listen to this music first.
I woke up this morning, get around for my shoes. Everybody got this, whoa, walking through the world. Up this morning, get around for my shoes. But about it, I got these old walking.
Folks, by the way, we'll have the list of the music list at the end. We'll put it in the chat for you so you have a playlist to go off of. But for now, we're just playing 30 seconds of it.
Kitson, do you have some comments about either the art or the music?
I have some comments. Of course, this is Robert Leroy Johnson, the music, who many, many people know of. He's one of the most talked about blues musicians in the Delta blues style. And he only recorded 29 songs, and he did it in 2 sessions only. So that was it for his live recording. Of course, he played live, many, many places. But the recording of his music only happened 2 times, and it was ultimately 29 songs. Much later, obviously in 1991, Columbia Records released a compilation of those songs, which sold 2 million copies. It would have been nice if he had lived long enough for that to happen, to collect those royalties. But of course, he died a pauper. And some of the musicians who claim that he influenced their style of music is Eric Clapton, probably the most famous one, Bob Dylan, and Led Zeppelin all claim that Robert Johnson was their talisman with regard to the musical concept of the blues. And yeah, so that's what I have to say about him. And actually, yeah, that's all I wanted to say about the music part. Thank you. And the painting, of course, is fantastic. The colors that are used, the sort of pastels, are a little different, I think. The fact that their faces are slightly muted, although you can see faces, but they're not so well defined. And also the uprightness of everybody. Every person is walking in a very upright, very sort of purposeful style of going to work, I'm assuming. And as you can see, the whole family is going, including the baby.
Yeah, I love Alice Wilson's work, and you're absolutely right. He really loves vertical lines, and there's a very famous painting of his that has to do with a funeral, and it has some pop culture cred, because if you used to watch the Cosby Show, that painting, his name is Ellis Wilson. And the mom says, oh, it was my Uncle Ellis that painted this painting. And she ends up buying it at an auction. And you actually can see the painting that stays up from that episode onward. So, he's got a lot of cred. But there's just a couple of things that I really love about this painting. For one thing, I love the tobacco plants in the back. And, we had to kind of look up the flowers and to see, oh, yeah, that I had no idea that tobacco plants have these white flowers like that. So I think that's really interesting. I also love the fact that they're barefoot. I think about the South as humid and full of snakes, and I'm so scared of snakes. And the idea of, walking around in these fields barefoot, just scares the crap out of me. But I actually think he's doing something else that's really interesting visually in this painting, which is that, you've got these really, really strong verticals. But at the same time, he has these very strong diagonals by using these various poles that he's using and hose and whatever instruments they're carrying. There's something about diagonal lines that's interesting, is that, when an artist wants to convey action, movement, chaos, things like that, they'll often use diagonals. So when you see these very, very strong verticals, and then you see these equally strong or just as strong diagonals, he's implying movement, action, and I think that that's a really nice touch. And of course, you mentioned those beautiful muted color skits on that he's using. It's a great piece, and he's another person that was, really well trained. He was at the University of Chicago, so these are not painters that are slapdash. They're really well. Both Johnson and Wilson were really well trained painters, and this is the style that they choose to paint in, and I think that's an important message there.
I find it also interesting that when Ellis Wilson was young, going to school, he was not allowed to take art, which is why he left that school and went to moved to Chicago, I believe, and went to school there for art. He was only allowed to take agriculture courses at the high school that he was in, where he lived. And here he is, several decades later, painting agriculture instead of working in agriculture.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I wanted to make just one more comment about Robert Johnson, which is that, I'm a guitarist, and, I cut my teeth on the Rolling Stones and guitarists like that. And one of the things that Keith Richards said about Robert Johnson when he heard it is he wanted to know who the second guitarist was that was playing with him. And there was no second guitarist. And that's what really blew him away, was the fact that he was really able to make a quote unquote orchestra out of his guitar. And so, he's so important in terms of his leadership in the blues, and so much of the music that I used to listen to in the 60s and 70s really was influenced by Robert Johnson.
Absolutely. I think if you'll ask any guitar player whether they feel they were influenced by him or not, about his style, and really to a man or a woman, his particular style of guitar playing is what the musicians were hearing. They weren't the words, the lyrics. That was one thing, obviously, but what they were hearing, because they can't imagine, they're trying to imagine themselves doing it. And they apparently couldn't. So it became a big mystery. How is Robert playing all these chords, all these notes just by himself on one guitar? So that's definitely a musician. He's a musician's musician for sure.
We did have a comment in chat I wanted to amplify. Sherry says she notes that they're walking with regal bearing.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And as we're approaching the midway of our presentation, I want to also say thank you to Smithsonian American Art Museum for having all these pieces available digitally for us, so we can have this experience. And so I want to say thank you to the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And the next piece, it's one of my favorites, and I can't wait.
I want to read one more comment from chat.
Go ahead.
Kendra Lee says, although full of movement and purpose, this scene feels relaxed and serene, a lovely way to see a Black agricultural family. So I think we have a lot of agreement on that.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for the comments. We really appreciate it. And also the next piece that we're going to be looking at is this one, if my computer can work properly. There we go. And Remy and Aswan will lead us to this. Let's listen to the music first that Dimitri has chosen for this piece.
Glory, glory, hallelujah, since I've laid my burden down. Glory, glory, hallelujah, since I've laid my burden down. No more sickness, no more sorrow, since I've laid my burden down.
Yeah. Aswan, did you want to start?
Okay, thank you, Remy. Yes, as someone had mentioned earlier, in terms of some of these portraits where where folks are depicted with dignity, I think that this represents that as well, standing tall. Normally picking cotton is bent over. It can be a very grueling, rough job, and here we see sort of an idealized form of the work, but not necessarily the work of the people. And looking at Earl Richardson's work, he was doing public work of art projects, and his style may have been formed by influenced by the new Negro movement that was in the 20s and 30s, and which really wanted to again give dignity and establish sort of Black cultural identity. In some ways, and we had discussed this, this piece is sort of reminiscent of Diego Rivera and some of the Mexican muralists that were also, they had a commonality in terms of looking at cultural identity and empowerment of the community they were portraying. So I think that this is a beautiful painting. I really love the woman whose posture, I wish I could get my posture like that. But anyway, the posture, the beautiful garment that she's wearing is very striking. Remy, would you like to?
Yeah, the only thing I was really going to add to that as well is if you look at the horizontal lines that's being created by the rows of cotton, and on one hand, it's all of these rows just going back for miles right into the horizon, and just this as a juxtaposition, you have all of this soft cotton, but then you have this back-breaking work done by the people. And the strength, you certainly see the strength in these workers' bodies, physical strength, physical power that it takes to literally move these bales of cotton around. And you see these very thick arms and solid bodies and grounded characters, and again, being at home in Africa, we get used to seeing people carry their wares on their head, and so we see the tradition continued in this painting as well. And I think the other thing that strikes me about this particular piece, which we look at a lot of different artists through these periods, is the use of the red and white, and very little other color in this as well. And that, I think, is also something that's quite unusual in terms of the color palette and choice as well. that we see with this.
This, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Yeah, this is bolder than the one we saw with pastels. Again, I agree with you. It's sort of is indicative of strength and, you know, a little more life, not life, but it's a stronger image, I think, for me.
Also,
yeah.
oh,
Music.
I'm sorry. Yes, the music.
The
You know,
music. I want Dimitri to comment on that.
And I'll keep it really, really fast. So the song is by Mississippi John Hurt, and the connection with him also is he started off as a sharecropper playing at night, and you know, self-financed his first record. It was a flop. Then you have the folk music revival of the 1960s, and so there's an interest that arises again, and so his music was recorded by the Library of Congress, and there it becomes, you know, it becomes available to all of these musicians. So Bob Dylan famously sang so many of these songs, Jerry Garcia, more recently Beck, and I'll stop at that. But, you know, again, a musician who, you know, self-taught at the age of 9, has a connection to the image that we're looking at. During the period that this painting was made, these were most likely sharecroppers, and he also was a sharecropper. So there's a direct connection. He continued to work as a farmer until he got rediscovered by the folk revival movement in 1964.
Thank you, Aswan, Remy, Dimitri, for that. And as we move into the next piece, I think the first photo that we're looking at I mean, it could be a painting, really. Let's listen to the music.
Babe, how long has that evening train been gone? How long? How long? Baby, how long? Yeah, and I stood at the station, watched my baby leaving town. Blue and disgusted, nowhere could peace be found.
Charlie, go ahead and lead us. I know you're going to leave us early today.
Sure, I am going to leave us with that. You know, that's Leroy Carr who's singing that. And, you know, we just talked about Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson recorded one of Leroy Carr's tunes. So, you know, I love that there's that connection there. But I really wanted to talk about this, you know, as a photograph. And I always, you know, you've heard me say this a million times. I always like to think about where the camera is, you know, so that, you know, if you're taking a picture of someone on the same level, eye level as they are, that tells one story. You know, if you're taking it in a bird's eye view from above, that tells another story. And if you're doing it from below in what's called a worm's eye view, that also tells a very different story. And, you know, here, he's taking this from a worm's eye view. And so, you know, what that makes us do is it makes us lift our heads up, right? It's as though we're looking upward at that person. And so it's a very proud way to present this person who's, you know, who's toiling in the fields. And, you know, McNeil was a great photographer, and even from a young age was able to get his work in, you know, sort of the popular press. And so I think it's a wonderful photo. It really tells us something. You know, you look at this photo, you go, oh, 1938, yeah, of course, that fits perfectly. It really fits in with our image of what it must have been like at that time. And I really like the low slung hat. That's a great touch. As you can imagine, it's really hot and sunny, and you would need to have that, you know, that low slung hat. And just his posture, you know, he's sitting on that, what I can only imagine is a really rough seat after a couple of hours on that machine. So it's a great photo.
Thanks, Charlie. Kids on.
Someone, was Kitson going to comment?
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot. It's part of the Virginia Project, which it gave credit to there, which was conceived by Sterling Brown, a faculty member at Howard University. And it was a unique project in that it had an all-Black research staff led by Hampton Institute scientist Roscoe Lewis. So he was sent to Virginia to, note, photograph historically the images of the Black people in Virginia and what they were doing in their daily life and daily tasks. And that this was actually a scientific project. It was fascinating, fascinating to me. And he didn't have like an endless supply of film. Okay, so his photos, when he's capturing these things, he's got to be thinking quite differently than photographers today with digital, which you can take endless shots and never even have to print one. He had only 160, whatever they were using at that time to make the image. He had only 160 of those. And then he had about a couple of rolls, or 3 or 4 rolls of 35 millimeter film for a Leica camera that he had to borrow. So the ability to capture and to study was he was limited in the number of items he had to work with, but his talent, fortunately, was unlimited. So I'm sure he was able to capture and do the work needed for this particular project, even with the limited resources he had. Of course, we all know sometimes when your resources are limited, that's when you do your best work because you can't be fooling around. So anyway, that's a little backstory for that.
Thank you so much.
I'm afraid I need
Go
to
ahead.
sign off, but I want to, first of
Bye,
all,
Charlie.
today you always do a great job with these, but in particular, I want to give a shout out to Dimitri, who, paired the two loves of my life, art and music, in such a brilliant way. So really enjoyed it. And of course, always great working with all of you on the panel. So see you next time. Bye-bye.
Hey, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. See ya. Yeah. And Dimitri, I remember you telling us a story about the same kind of wagon and in your family. And so tell us a little bit about that, because I'm I'm curious.
It's just an interesting thing. My wife is from Indianapolis, and the family has a farm, an 11-acre farm, and there's one of these old wagons from the 19th century, probably, that looks just like this, and those seats are fun. They bounce a lot. The spring is built in to the metal that holds the seat up, and we attach it to a truck and ride around, and it sounds silly for a city boy like me from Oakland, but it's so much fun. I just gotta tell you, if you haven't done a wagon ride, you gotta do one.
And next time I run into a wagon, I'll be sure to hook it up.
and be grateful it's not your real job anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we have this next piece, and Rodney and I will lead through the conversation and looking at the art. But before that, let's listen to the music.
Well, I laid down last night. Well, I tried to take my rest. Notion struck me last night, babe. I believe I take a stroll out west. 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 Take a stroll.
May I say a little bit about the music before you guys go into the
Yes,
art?
please. Yes, please.
First of all, I love this song. I love his delivery, the way he clips the words at the end. I just love this song. Anyway, this particular man, Robert Petway, only recorded 16 songs. That's the entirety of his catalog of recorded music. Of course, his catalog is probably much bigger, although they're not sure when he was born. They don't know when he died. So, this lack of statistics for African-American artists, just African-American people who've contributed in any way to this country is really sad and very frustrating, actually. Some of the musicians who claim influence by he influenced are John Lee Hooker, who lived right here in the Bay Area in Richmond for years and was one of our favorite blues artists here in the Bay Area. Muddy Waters and Jimi Hendrix claim that he was possibly an influence of theirs. So that's what I wanted to tell you.
Well, I also want to just kind of jump in on that one too. This particular track, not only because Petway has this just, you know, it's this very down home country sound to it, which is what this painting also makes me think of. But that particular song, Catfish Blues, is his most famous track, and became famous. You mentioned Muddy Waters. When Muddy Waters redid his track Rolling Stone, he used the same arrangement and very similar lyrics. He changes it just a little. And then most recently, Gary Clark Jr. redid Catfish Blues. So many others in between that, but just, you know, that this song is one of those essential blues tracks. And
you know, Dimitri, the question I have for you is, do you know if these songs in their lifetime were copyrighted to them? Nope. And so, you know, copyrighted to them so that if they had progeny, they could reap the benefits of the re-recordings of these songs, or no?
No, you know, that's our history for so long.
I just want to double check.
It's our history for so long that no, you got the few shekels for you know, for cutting that record, and
that was
you didn't get the royalties or anything else from it. So
yeah. Actually, that same thing happened to my father, so I don't even know how I'd be asking. hoping it would help.
And it's still happening today to artists as well.
Yeah, but today, that's on them.
Well, kind of commenting on that, Cynthia says in chat, it's amazing how the visual as well as musical artists made beauty out of sad, poor living and working conditions. And I think this painting is a great example of that. I don't imagine these two boys come from much, but they engage us. You know, I love the way they both look at us, and they look at us in different ways. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I think there's something kind of playful in, maybe even a little mischievous. The boy on the right in the green hat, you know, and his older brother is maybe he's a little more, you know, he's thinking more about the hard work they've been doing, and maybe the younger one is thinking about something like getting away from their chores and maybe having some fun. I don't know. What Sade, what were your reactions to this?
To this, you know, I kept on thinking about how thinly the paint is applied to the canvas, and and there's something that Remy said when we were looking at this art, that's so many color to make white. And so to look at their shirt and to say that it's white, you almost have to look a little bit closer and see all these colors. And I had not paid attention to that until Remy mentioned that. And then before that, I was just like, this is such thinly layered canvas that I can see the grains of the canvas, kind of like the way, you know, how it's woven. And so that was one of the things that immediately caught my attention. And the other one is the grass underneath the grass, and how carefully that sort of almost impressionist style of painting is done on the grass. That was kind of cool for me. But also thinking about the siblings, and to learn about Marvin Gray Johnson, who is, you know, one of the most important figures of, or in visual arts, one of the most important figures in the Harlem Renaissance, and who really connects to his African or his African roots, as many artists at that time did. And as I look at the siblings, I also think about his sister Maggie, who was the first one to give him art supplies. And so this is kind of heartwarming to me. I see the siblings sitting here, and I see how his sister was also, Marvin Gray Johnson's sister was instrumental in sort of igniting his artist career or his painting career. So it's a nice one for me to look at. It also makes me think of my siblings. I'm a younger sibling of the youngest of, well, I used to be the youngest of my family. That's a long story, but but yeah, that's the kind of thing that reminds me of. Yeah.
See, I'm the oldest, so I'm more like the
responsible one.
Yeah, like, hey, we got some work we got to get done. I also want to comment on this is oil on canvas, but it almost has a pastel feeling to me. What he's doing with the colors is really extraordinary.
Oh yeah,
it's a wonderfully done painting. And I think that's part of what draws us in is like the blues and the greens. In the whites, he's just really a master of color.
I wanted to add something to this. Both this artist and Earl Richardson were going to be doing a mural series of Negro achievement that was now the Schomburg, but at the time was Harlem, the New York Library in Harlem, 135th, and they both passed before that opportunity happened. Oh
wow, yeah.
And I want to call out Joan's comment in chat. She says the grass to me represents the fertility of the earth. So yeah, it's a very this is obviously not a place experiencing a drought.
You were from California, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, this next piece is, of course, close to my heart. So let's listen to the music, look at it, and then we'll talk about Kansas City, Kansas.
That's a great pairing.
Yeah, it is.
So do you want to go first with this today, or would you like me to?
Oh, either way is fine. Go ahead, Rodney, actually.
To me, I really am interested in the mood of this. It does remind me of Van Gogh's Starry Night, and yet it's got, I think, a different mood. These people in this, because Starry Night for Van Gogh was not about people, but this is about these three figures in the night trying to, maybe they're going home, they're staying close to each other. It's intriguing to me that it's called Kansas City, Kansas, because I always think of that as like this big city, and yet this is a kind of rural scene. And I don't know if that's because this is from an earlier period. I think the date on this is 1897, if I'm correct. And so I think we get a little bit of a history lesson here, and the way he evokes the night, I think, is really, like Van Gogh. It's kind of magical.
Yeah, it is. And I really don't know. I mean, his parents moved around. So Henry Ossawa Tanner, who's known for painting religious figures, right? So he's been painting religious figures, and you can hardly find any paintings of his other than his mother's. He painted his mother. Other than few paintings, you can't find Black subjects, right? So we don't really know what he's doing here. I don't really understand. I don't really know if these are Black subjects, the three people that you see. And so he painted kind of like the nativity, and which kind of evokes that feeling when we look at this. He paints Moses, Abraham, all these biblical kind of stories. And I think in some ways, to make up for the fact that his dad wanted him to be a church guy, a bishop or something, but he chose to be a visual artist. I'm pretty sure he could have done both, but then he left his town and was able to explore his artistic endeavors. But I will say that his parents traveled around, even though we know that in Kansas City, Kansas, that there weren't many Black folks at the time, but there was an area in Kansas City, Kansas, where free Black folks were living. So I'm wondering if he was sort of rendering that. And here's another one of Kansas City, Kansas, which is, folks, very different from Kansas City, Missouri, where I have lived. It's a very important distinction for those of us who are from Missouri. And so, and this is also Kansas City, Kansas. And the way that he has these figures, I don't see 3 people, maybe 2 people and a child in this one, but you can kind of see that maybe he went to visit his family and painted these. And this, I like the watercolor kind of blotted paint that he's using, because he's a meticulous painter. And so I like the feeling that this painting gives.
We have some comments in chat. Roger is thinking maybe it's the outskirts of Kansas City, and I think that's what you were telling us today.
Yeah.
Cynthia thinks it could be people walking home from church late at night. And then Cynthia also says it does seem to have religious tones. I would agree with that. I think there is something religious about it. Even though, I mean, we're kind of influenced by the fact that was mostly what he painted. But yeah, it's not a surprise to think of it in those terms. And then Ken says, if that's a moonrise, the figures are walking west, away from Kansas City, Kansas. That's a great thought.
So the watercolor does make it very, there's revelry in it and delicacy in his work. There just feels like this real touch of gentleness that sometimes I think you don't always get with other types of paint as well. So I think it's just really interesting choice for him to choose this subject matter, but also to choose watercolor, which gives it that kind of ethereal and somewhat ephemeral subject that goes often with religious works and stuff like that. So,
and it's also, I think that's a good point. And also, I think he might be marking that this Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri, they were sort of a passageway for in the Underground Railroad kind of at that time. And also, if you're heading west, it's sort of a passageway. So this movement and going from one place to another at night, and this kind of painting kind of, I think, was reminiscent of that time also. And and he was born, I think, in the 1850s, I believe. Yeah.
1859.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to comment and in terms of not just this piece, but you can go to the other piece as well, is just hearing all of this blues music as well. I think I was saying to Dimitri before is that I was inquiring as to, as they took away our drums, you can certainly hear in the blues the 1-2, the heartbeat of the funde, the heartbeat that would have been in a drum beat, that's transferred into the blues, where you just hear, like, I can hear the djembe, I can hear that 1-2 downbeat going on throughout all of this music. And I like my blues dirty, like I like my martinis. That's what I'm saying, and that's I'm sticking with that as well. So I don't know if Dimitri wanted to speak on that in terms of the drum and the
I think the next piece, Remy, I almost want to go to that one, and so you could just looking at that, I might this piece.
Yes,
because I think we also talked about the drum on this one as well. Let's listen to the pairing that Dimitri has for this one, and then
felt so low. Nobody wants me round their door. Without a doubt, no man can use you when you down and out. I mean, when you down and out.
It's hard to even talk after hearing Bessie Smith sing that with such passion.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'll start and just note, first of all, I feel really connected to the artwork because I spent some time before I moved here. I lived in Philadelphia, and people hanging around fires in cans was a very common thing. I don't think we see very much of that in the Bay Area, but on the East Coast, it's a much more common thing. But this isn't really the scene. Usually the scene strikes me as more stark. So I'm really intrigued by the use of colors here, and I'm wondering, like, are the colors really making us think about sound? Are they evoking sound? So I love, like, the bright colors. You can kind of it makes the figures in the gathering inviting to us. I think we're kind of like welcomed in. And the other thing is Bessie Smith, as a Haight-Ashbury guide, I just have to say, like, we've been talking about all the white musicians who were inspired by these blues musicians, but Janis Joplin loved Bessie Smith, and so it's kind of interesting to me to think about those connections. That music really just really did launch the rock and roll careers of a lot of people.
Yeah, I want to hear also what folks think about this painting. We've talked about it a few times. And this is when the artist sort of Delaney changed his style to representation, and from representation to abstraction, and what do folks think about this piece?
Yeah, it was interesting to see that he really became an abstract expressionist. This is from, I think, this is from kind of the middle of his career, 1946. Yeah. And it was interesting to read that he struggled financially throughout his life, so he may have related to people who would be kind of in this position. And then the other thing he has in common with Henry Ossawa Tanner that we just looked at previously is they both ended up moving to Paris. They both kind of fell in love with Paris, and I think spent the rest of their lives there.
Yeah. I just have to say, folks are sticking with us and enjoying this program. I appreciate that so much. We have just three more pieces to go through left, and there's a part two on July 29th. So on July 29th, there's a part 2 to this. So I hope you can join us for that too, and I will email that to you directly along with the music list. And so just moving on to the next piece, which is one of my favorites. Remy, yeah. Here's the music.
Big Mama was sitting there looking at the rain. Sitting by the window, baby. Oh, I was looking out at the rain.
Yeah. Remy, what do you think?
We can't hear you, Rem.
Yeah. I want to just point out to how the sisters are just suited booted and represented with their finery in this particular photograph, full stockings on, fur collar, which we think is probably a full fox, probably with the eyes and head on the first stole of the collar as well, and just sat here outside. This photograph is what is named as the slave markets in the Bronx. And I did a little further digging in terms of what was going on, and possibly the reason why Forbes did not put this photograph into their collection. If you look into the Library of Congress, there's a couple of interviews there was a woman called Vivian Morris who interviewed people who would go to the slave market, the women that would work at the slave market. And it's where you would go if you wanted to get domestic work for the day. And the time of the day at that time, the Karens of the day would walk around and try to get the best price of work for a day's work from these African American day workers, and quite often would go around and just beat them down price wise to get them to wash windows, to do laundry, to just anything that they could get them to do, but often not pay them the full price of their wages. And so quite often the women would gather and barter their own prices for what they were willing to do, for what they were willing to get. Anything, it would sometimes be $6 for a whole day's work, but end up getting paid, like for a few hours of 75 cents or 25 cents as well. And there was some interviews of the women who worked these jobs, and it sounds like that Robert McNeil put this photograph together because quite often the women weren't dressed like this. They were often maybe looking very tired or beat down, but he wanted to represent that we were also doing well. We were also determining our own prices, and that we weren't all getting beaten down by the Karens of the day of just, taking us for a ride and just not paying us what we were worth as well. And we see this sister here going through the newspaper looking for opportunities. We're looking at her, we're thinking that maybe she was a nurse or a midwife. You can see she's wearing full stockings, shoes. This is a wool coat as well. And she sat on this potato box as well. And the brother next to her, he's got the turn-ups on his you call them cuffs, I think, here in America, but the turn-ups on his trousers, his shoes. He's got his bucket, which is, often you would have to show up with your tools of your trade or whatever you were going to do. If you were washing windows that day, you might have to show up with your own bucket. You might even get fed like a cracker or something. So you were doing a full day's work, and you would be given often a cracker and maybe a slice of cheese to eat. But this crew ain't having none of it. They're showing up and they're looking, to me, it looks like they're looking for the higher paid opportunities that the white women of the day were in charge of going around these markets and getting. It's the early temp agencies, which we know is. Let me not go there. Stop me. Okay.
Can we also just talk about Big Mama Thornton real quick?
Yes, go ahead.
I promise I'll keep it really really short. So, someone in the comment also said, they picked her up when she was visiting locally from the airport. That's really awesome. I'm not going to bring a lot with it except for that Big Mama Thornton, everybody knows her from being the original artist to sing Hound Dog. Though Elvis becomes famous for it and made way more money than she ever did, but she, topped she was on the charts at the number one spot for 7 months or something like that. So 2 million records of that, and is really responsible for really the birth and growth of rock and roll music. So we had to put her, and Ball and Chain is her original composition. She entirely wrote that, and it's, I mean, how more classic blues and soul can you possibly get than that track? Love it.
And that's a perfect example because the original record company that recorded it didn't release it. And so the royalty situation and the copyright situation wasn't set. So by the time Janis did it, she was free to do it. But of course, she had spoken to Big Mama and asked if she could do the song. And Big Mama gave her permission to do the song. And then I believe what happened is that Janis sent her royalties from her own pocket, from her own share.
Look at that. Okay, Janis
So
Joplin.
Janis was down. Janis was not, she wasn't trying to rip people off, and she was a blues woman. She just happened to be white from Texas, that's all. But she was definitely a blues woman for sure. And she knew the history of how people have been treated. So she made sure that that when she did that song, that Big Mama did not suffer the same fate.
That is incredible.
It might be worth mentioning too that the Haight-Ashbury that she lived in was a mixed with a very large African American population. A lot of people from the Fillmore had moved to the Haight-Ashbury at that time. So I think this blues music was in the air in the Haight-Ashbury.
Yeah, it was coming out the windows, people, when they were playing.
Oh,
Literally.
I like that, Kitson. So the next piece, and after that we have one, and we will conclude today's, but there is part one, and we'll email everyone the link for that one. And so let's look at this painting. Going back to painting after that beautiful photo, and Remy, we love you.
I love this.
You may be rich, you may be poor, you may be young, you may be old, but when the Lord gets ready, you gotta move. You may be high.
That was a sudden cut. Sorry about that. Yeah.
This is so beautiful.
Yeah, this is the portrait of Anna Washington Derry. She by Laura Wheeler Waring. She was born in the 1800s, lived in mid 1800s, and moved. Her family moved to from Maryland into the Pennsylvania area, an area that was probably had a lot of a few communities of free African Americans as well as people of color, possibly connected with the Underground Railroad at some point. But she was she attended Thornbury AME Church, and which was really a community center as well for the community of Black residents. She met the artist possibly either in the church or at Cheyney University, which is historically the first actually historical Black college that was established in 1837. So, and she was working there, providing services, and Laura Wheeler Waring, who was an artist, in fact, wasn't a starving artist, was probably well-to-do and was teaching as an art instructor and a choir director at Cheyney. So I love this, well, let me go back. I would say that in the background, if you can make it out, you'll see that her name.
I'll zoom.
Pardon? Yeah. Oh,
No,
no, you had it where it was.
Oh, okay.
because it has her name back there. You can
Right, Anna Washington, yeah.
Washington Dairy, and it's in the year of our Lord, or Anna Domini 19, and they don't have the year. But
I wonder if it's 27 because it was painted on 27.
I'm guessing. Yeah, I would say that. But it's a beautiful piece. It has the interesting history because Laura Wheeler Waring was doing a lot of notable people in the Black community, both family and what have you. And Anna Washington Dairy was actually very involved, the matriarch in the community, but not as well known. But this picture, this painting, actually became probably one of her best works, one of her better works, and most renowned, and that actually had gone abroad and what have you. But what I love are the subdued colors. Again, we look at dignity in the woman. You see that she's married. There's an indicator there, but she reminds me of a woman I used to know named Mrs. Harrison.
Oh my goodness.
She's an elder in the community, and she was calm or quiet, but she had a quiet sternness, but she was fair. And you'd always feel comfortable around her because she, anyway, she had that sort of vibe for me. But would you like to comment on me as well?
Yeah, I think first of all, I just think this is so beautiful. Every time I look at this picture, I see my own mother, but I also see
me too.
I also see mother figure, as in, we all have this mother type of figure in our community, Big Mama, but not use, the quiet Big Mama, the one that's very, like, and the diasporic lean where she's got her arms folded. We all know what that means, okay? If Mama's she's looking at you and her arms are folded, you better get in that house. I don't know what you did, but you better get in that house because she's looking at you and you did something. If she said something, but the beauty of this piece and just the color palette. I mean, again, we're looking at such little use of color, but that tells and conveys this amazing story of the strength of this woman, the beauty of her inside and out, and just like we can see the back of her head in the shadow, the ring on her finger. It's so real, you can almost see her breathe. And I think that just speaks to the absolute stellar work of an artist, that when you look at a painting and it feels like a photograph, or you feel like you can have a conversation with the subject matter. So
thank you, Remy. And the version of that song with Cassandra Wilson, I want Dimitri to say something about that. No. We have one more piece and then it's over. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, because Cassandra Wilson is my favorite artist of all time.
And Remy's.
Was born in Mississippi, is still alive, formerly trained as a jazz musician, but she's from Mississippi. She brings the blues. I mean, and that's all I got to say about her. She is magic.
Yes.
This last piece is neither a photo or painting, so we thought this would be a great one to end with, and this is a Gala Fanner, which well, let's listen to the music and we'll talk about. This fan, this fan about how you can, it's functional, but also there is this art and design and pattern to it that is sort of, our eyes cannot escape from it. And it's made out of, palm tree and I don't know what they're called in English, but we have this in Ethiopia where I grew up to separate chaff from the grain. And so to learn that this was used for rice in the Gala Gechi area was to separate rice from its coat, I guess, chaff, right, Dimitri? Husk. Is that right? Okay.
I think so.
It was such a nice magical connection for me. I just really appreciated it, which something that I thought was very, very distinctly African to see that cross here and be used, have the same purpose. And not only that, in Ethiopia there is an area called Minja Shankora, and in that area we use it, and that's where my mother's family is from. And we have a dance as you're separating the grain, as you're fanning it, you have a dance that goes with it. And so to me, it conjures so many feelings when I look at it. Also, Dimitri, sorry, this recording that I found of Sun House was just so beautiful and reminded me of this kind of snake-like pattern that we see here.
Hard for the shall see God. So I love everybody. I love a snake if I wasn't scared of him, but I can't trust him too much. Some of them say, oh, the snake that lays an egg is not poison, except with the one that bites them, like rattlesnakes and things. So them the ones that's poison. I don't trust none of them. I don't care how many eggs he lays. It don't make it. All I want to know is his name's Snake. Well, anyway.
I just loved hearing his voice and talk about something that I could visually kind of see the pattern in the art. So thank you so much for sticking with us. And there's so much we can say about each piece, and obviously we don't have all the time in the world, and we could not be doing the work that we do without you. So if you'd like to support us, one, attend our events, and two, if you would like to support us monetarily, you can text. You can do it by text message. It's easy, it's pretty quick. You can support us that way. And most importantly, I would like to ask you to become a member and part of our community, our MOAD community. You're already MOAD community, but I would like to ask you to be members and join us on our programs. Next, on the 26th, on the 29th, we'll see you again. I'll email you that link. And I would like to thank the docents. And Dimitri, shout out to you for this round. We'll be back again with other types of music, other types of art and art talk. Thank you so much, Dimitri Aswan, Charlie, and Rodney, and Kitson, who joined us today. Thank you. Bye, all.